Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Thursday, September 23rd, 2021, and today we're going to be talking about the Virginia gubernatorial election between Glenn Youngkin and Terry McAuliffe, here with Terry McAuliffe taking a lead of 2.8% across the state, with a more recent University of Mary Washington poll released showing that Glenn Youngkin, however, takes a 5-point lead in this statewide race. The reason why this is news is because the Virginia governor election is now at its narrowest point of the entirety of the election season, a week following the primary, debate across the state. And you can see here that amongst all of the polls that have been released, not one has shown the Republican Party ahead besides this University of Mary Washington poll itself. And I actually want to go into it just a little bit to give you a bit of an understanding as to whether or not this is the worst or best news that either party could be getting. And right now, what you see here is that amongst likely voters, Glenn Youngkin gets a 5-point lead over Terry McAuliffe, but then there is that question amongst regular voters, amongst registered voters, simply people out in the state. Now, the reason why this group might be different than others is because the likely voter group is typically more Republican leaning. The reason for that being whiter voters, older voters, richer voters, all voters that shift towards the right relative to other groups across this nation are the most likely to vote. Which means that in a state like Virginia, where you have a very high population that are in the Northern Virginia area that are comprised of very affluent voters, very much considered to be white voters. These are people who will turn out at a higher rate than minorities across the state, which is why amongst registered voters, the numbers change differently. Terry McAuliffe takes a 5-point lead amongst registered voters, so it looks like, actually looking at the Real Clear Politics numbers here, that they only take into consideration likely voters. I'm not entirely sure how they choose the methodology or whether or not they just cherry pick this poll for the purpose of showing a Republican ahead in a single poll that had never been released before, but I'm not entirely sure what the motive was for showing the GOP ahead, but the GOP was still ahead amongst likely voters, whereas Terry McAuliffe has actually taken a lead amongst every other poll that shows that likely voters are ahead. But it's sort of a telling sign that this poll, combined with the narrowing of Emerson College, the narrowing of Monmouth University, Washington Post, which is an A+ rated pollster, showing Terry McAuliffe ahead by simply just 3 points. The narrowing is happening, and it doesn't really matter that there might be some type of cherry picking of the polls here. Regardless of it all, you cannot deny that Terry McAuliffe is now dipping down to a lower point compared to where he used to be. Now, if you're looking at the 2017 election, you might not necessarily view this as the worst thing that could be for the Democratic Party. On Election Day in 2017, Ralph Northam only had a 3.3% lead. He ended up winning by 8.9%. But the unfortunate reality is that not every election in Virginia mimics 2017. In fact, in most cases, overestimation for the Democratic Party is common. For instance, taking a look at the 2020 presidential race in the state of Virginia, Joe Biden won by 10.1%. He was expected to win by 11.8%. You take a look at the polling data in 2016. Seems to be spot on, not an overestimation for the Democratic Party, but still somewhere around there, which means that sure, the governor polls might indicate a Terry McAuliffe victory, and I still expect him to win the race. I'm not at all expecting Glenn Youngkin to win, but what I am saying is that you must notice that there is some type of Democratic overestimation. So 2017, we might not have seen it, but we did see it in 2020. We also saw it in other elections. Let's say, for instance, we take a look at the 2020 race. Mark Warner only won this race by 11 points across the state, narrowly outperforming President Biden, or at the time, Vice President Biden. But taking a look at the polls leading up to it, you had Virginia Commonwealth University putting him ahead by 17, Roanoke College putting him ahead by 16, Christopher Newport University putting him ahead by 20, the Washington Post, an A+ rated pollster, putting him ahead by 18. These are reductions at a minimum of 5 points and a maximum of 10 points. That is why it is important to point this out, because sometimes Virginia polls can be accurate like they were in 2016, but sometimes, and in fact in most cases, they overestimate Democratic support across the state. And that's what Democrats should be worried about for this race. Even in 2018, Tim Kaine was expected to win at a minimum of 16 points leading up to the election. At some points, VCU had him ahead by 23. Quinnipiac had him ahead by 18. In the Virginia Senate race here, Tim Kaine did end up winning by 15.7%. Not necessarily bad at all. I mean, this was a safe state for the Democrats, but I will say that the Virginia polls did seem to over-expect the Democratic Party to do better in this race, and that just simply wasn't the reality of it all. So Regardless of what you're taking a look at, there are scenarios in which Virginia does seem to be spot on for the case of 2016, underestimating Democratic support in 2017, but when it comes down to the 2018 races, overestimated Democratic support. When it comes down to the 2020 presidential race, the Virginia House of Representatives race, when it comes down to the Senate race in the state of Virginia, typically speaking, at least more recently, Virginia polls might be overemphasizing the amount of Democratic support across the state. And while that might not have mattered when Terry McAuliffe was up 7 points across the state, it matters when you're only up by 3. When you're within the margin of error, it absolutely matters because it could truly go either way. And I think, like I had said, a lot of this has to do with the debate that recently occurred. Now, I do think that this debate definitely was a bump for Glenn Youngkin. It doesn't matter if people think that he won the debate or not. I personally have not looked into it, and I did not watch the entirety of the debate. I saw some major takeaways here, which we can actually go through the Associated Press. They talk about issues such as election integrity, qualified immunity, state agency controversies, renewable energy policies, a lot of things, vaccine mandates, things amongst that, abortion. These were things mentioned in the Virginia gubernatorial debate. I almost said primary. I don't know why I said primary. In this debate. And a lot of it might be surprising to see that Glenn Youngkin still stuck to his values. Now, he did not necessarily, in fact, probably at all, embody President Trump in this debate. I did not get that type of aura from Glenn Youngkin when it came down to this Virginia gubernatorial debate, largely because he knows that just is not a winning strategy. Looking at the state of Virginia in recent elections, I mean, you would never expect to replicate President Trump and win. Republicans have tried that. You saw that with Corey Stewart in 2018. He lost by 16 points across the state against Tim Kaine. Ed Gillespie pushed President Trump away, but President Trump's presence in the White House was enough to keep Virginia blue. And that's what I think the Democratic Party is really trying to associate Glenn Youngkin with President Trump on every single regard. When you take a look at the way that Terry McAuliffe has been sending out campaign mailers associating Trump and Youngkin, there's a reason for that. When you look at the way that the Democratic Party in Virginia has been utilizing the rhetoric of Trump, Youngkin together, they're doing that for a reason. They know that President Trump is an unpopular figure in Virginia, but I'm not entirely sure if that strategy seems to be working now. The fact is, for the first time in Virginia's gubernatorial race history in this time, for this election, the Republicans have taken the lead in two polls. The first one being WPAI, which is a Republican pollster, so I disregarded that one. It was not included in Real Clear Politics. But University of Mary Washington, however, released the numbers that shows that Glenn Youngkin takes the lead amongst likely voters. And energy/enthusiasm is also very important for states such as Virginia. If people are not excited to turn out the way that they were in 2017, you're not going to see a 2017 type of victory. And another reason why this is also very important is because it simply isn't just the governor election that is at stake in 2021, but also the lieutenant governor race, one that was actually within 5 points in 2017, despite Ralph Northam winning by 9 points across the state. There could be a reality in which a Republican lieutenant governor is elected. In the attorney general's race, it also was not as large of a victory as the gubernatorial race was, even though there was an incumbent running for re-election in the attorney general's race. Sometimes things simply just don't go through well for the Democratic Party, but they luck out like they did in 2017. In the House of Delegates, this is up in 2021, where the Democratic majority is actually at possibility of being lost. Democrats just won back control of the House of Delegates in 2019. Republicans actually had a supermajority following the 2013 governor election. In 2015, they had 66 seats to the Democratic Party's 34. At one time, I think the previous term, 67 to 33. So you'll see here that the Democratic Party definitely has made major inroads compared to what the former map used to look like, compared to what the supermajority used to look like, but it also is a possibility that the Democrats do lose the majority here, and the Republicans are able to reclaim this, and then 2 years from now, reclaim the state Senate and potentially block a newly elected Terry McAuliffe or maybe even Glenn Youngkin and help him in his administration and what their goals are for the Virginia gubernatorial race for 2021 through 2025. But the point is, all around in the state of Virginia, despite Joe Biden's presence, which actually might be dragging them down at this point, despite the major nationalized focus on the state of Virginia, Democrats are not exciting the voters the way that they could be in this race. I said before that Glenn Youngkin had made a number of missteps in order to get to this point, being so far down in the preliminary election data. And I partially do stand by that. I think that this race was absolutely winnable for Glenn Youngkin, and if he loses, it's not because it was never a winnable race. Glenn Youngkin could be in the lead right now if he had played his cards right from the beginning, but obviously that isn't always the case. Politicians are never perfect, debate performances are never perfect, and also some of the things were out of the control of Glenn Youngkin. Obviously, a lot of them were his fault. For instance, the hot mic tape where someone was recording him talking about abortion, that was his fault, but did he think he was going to be recorded? Did he think it was going to go public? Obviously not, but he's not the only politician to lie. It's not exclusive to Glenn Youngkin. There are plenty of people who do not publicize their positions until they are in office, and even then, they might try to hide it under some type of guise, which I could absolutely see Glenn Youngkin doing, except for the fact that that tape was released. And then you move on to things outside of that, when you talk about Donald Trump's endorsement of this race. In fact, Donald Trump today endorsed Glenn Youngkin again in this state, which means that the Democratic Party is going to jump on that as an opportunity. But the thing is, I'm questioning if that has been paying off. I think it worked for a brief period of time, especially when they had Joe Biden in the state, when they had Joe Biden focusing heavily on the race itself. But after Joe Biden, and as he is now, falling out of public favor, it might not be helping them. Virginia is a state where a popular Democratic president can bring the Democrats across the state to victory. Terry McAuliffe defied expectations in 2013, but then again, he only won by a narrow amount. In fact, in his most recent election in 2013, you can see the polls overestimated again Democratic support. Terry McAuliffe led by 6.7% on election day, only won by 2.5%. That is a 4.2% swing. You swing the new numbers by 4.2%. And the Republicans win the governor election. But if you had swung previous numbers, let's say, for instance, you go back into early September, right at the beginning of the month, you swing it by 4 points, the Democrats still win. You take July and August, and you'll see that no matter where you were in time, except up until now, if you swung by 4 points, the Democrats would still win the gubernatorial race. Now, obviously, that is just bad luck for the Democratic Party. They probably will be able to continue holding on to this state. The political betting markets expect it to. Personally, I expect it to. But you cannot deny the quick shift in overall support across the state towards the Republican Party. Glenn Youngkin must have done something at that debate that the Democratic Party wasn't able to counteract. Or maybe the Democratic Party's rhetoric seems to be fizzling off with Joe Biden falling out of public favor. Because it was one thing for Joe Biden to be disapproved of by just under a point nationwide, but to be down nearly 3 points across the nation, that's very different. And Virginia could very well come down to the wire. I think that it also is interesting to point out that Virginia definitely used to be a swing state. And just the same way that Democrats were able to narrow up safe Republican districts in the House of Representatives in 2018 and 2017, the same way Democrats were able to win in Republican states in 2018, for instance, in the state of Kansas or other states, victories for opposition parties can come in the states you might not expect it, especially with the incumbent party being in the White House. Because that's how midterms work. That's how these types of elections work leading up to midterms. We just thought for a period of time, and I do think that Democrats can hold on to it, but we did think that Democrats might be potentially resistant to what the red wave was bringing. But now we are starting to see a narrowed up Virginia race. I just made a video about how New Jersey might be closer than we expected, and it all starts to tumble down. This is exactly what happened in 2009 leading into 2010. Democrats were at a very high point. They were doing well with President Obama's approval rating, and then it started to tank, and then eventually Republicans ended up gaining momentum and flipping that lead. By 2022, what do I expect for the United States House and the United States Senate? I expect a Republican takeover. Upon reanalysis, maybe that will change, but as of right now, I am standing by that. Democrats probably have a much better chance of winning the Senate, holding on to it, than they do retaining the control of the House, and a very slim chance at retaining both. A very, very slim chance. But all in all, Virginia will be that true race that will determine what is going to happen for the Democrats in 2022. Eyes there, eyes also on the state of New Jersey. That is a traditionally Democratic state. We will see what happens if Democrats don't exactly win it by the margin that they would like it to. All in all, there is just a number of interesting things to dissect from the state of Virginia. University of Mary Washington just now releasing a poll that shows that Glenn Youngkin takes a 5-point lead amongst likely voters, which might indicate that Terry McAuliffe is in some trouble. There is a lot to unpack. There is more to look at this race than the simple, the Democratic Party is going to win here. While Democrats may have maintained months of a lead, probably for the past year, even Terry McAuliffe maintaining that lead through the primary, through the general election, it is finally starting to get very close in a state that just went to Joe Biden by 10.1% in the 2020 election. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2021 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.